Good afternoon, everybody. The International Parking and Mobility Institute is pleased to present today's presentation, Leadership on Their Terms, to Ease Stress and Enable Focus. My name is Justin, and I'll be assisting moderating Colleen Neese in moderating today's Shoptalk. As a reminder, today's Shoptalk is being recorded. We will make the recording available online and post it to IPMI's YouTube channel once completed. And now, before we start, I would like to introduce Dave Honorado Cap, IPMI Chair, to say a few words.
Good afternoon and good morning to those on the West Coast. I would like to thank Justin and the IPMI staff for coordinating and making today's Shop Talk a reality, and Colleen for moderating today's session. These are some unprecedented times and not business as usual for all of us. It's hard to predict when restrictions will be lifted and people have freedom to return to work and roam the areas again. But it's important to plan ahead, as many of you probably are. Today's discussion, as with all the Shop Talks, enable us to share our thoughts, issues, and even our stress levels with peers. It's good to know that we are not going through this pandemic alone. By working together, communicating and sharing our concerns, issues, and how we are dealing with today's new norm, we will get through this crisis together. IPMI is committed in doing its part by providing and sharing information with our membership and providing forums for you to communicate with us and your peers. Again, I'd like to thank staff for organizing today's Shop Talk, and thank you for your participation, especially during these trying times. Please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Dave. Before we get started today, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping rules before I turn it over to Colleen. If you have a webcam and you're comfortable doing so, please turn your camera on. IPMI wants to make everyone feel engaged and participate, and we want to see your smiling faces. We want this virtual Shop Talk to be just like our regular Shop Talk, face-to-face and sharing our ideas. As a reminder, all participants' lines are muted. We invite everyone to participate. To do so, we ask them to please use the raise your hand feature. For online participants, please click on the participant icon in the Zoom control menu. A separate window will pop up. The raise your hand option will appear at the bottom of the participants menu. Once you click the raise your hand, you will be recognized and your line will be unmuted. Phone participants can press *9 to raise their hand and then press *6 to unmute yourself. Once recognized, your microphone will be unmuted and allowed to join the conversation. Please say your name and the organization that you're from, so that way everyone knows who you are. You may also type your questions into the chat. Click the chat icon and then type in your question or comment and click send. I will read this again to the group. Now I'd like to turn the audience over to Colleen.
All right, thank you so much, Justin and Dave and all of you for joining me this afternoon. I'm gonna bring up my PowerPoint, which is not, here it is. It's always, there we go. So today's topic is leadership on their terms for ease and stress, to ease stress and enable focus. You know, every day we hear we're living in an unprecedented time. Yesterday I was on the phone with a client and he said to me, you know what, Carl, one day I'd like to just get through the day and not have to say the term COVID-19. People, my family, and you know, that's obviously reflective of the unprecedented time we're living in. But as leaders, which is really what today's Shop Talk is about, is contemplating how we pivot our leadership style so that we can be as effective in today's work environment with all of the unknown, the uncertainty, our employees, what they need from us in terms of being their leaders. And I've done, you know, through my research and my consulting, I found that there's really 3 buckets that are up here on the screen that I think are the most common leadership traits or competencies that I find today's leaders around the parking industry, quite honestly, are really relying on to help that quote that's up at the top from a Gallup study to lower the worry and higher the confidence. And just to kind of speak parenthetically about that study, It's a great study. I'm happy to send the link to IPMI, include a part of this deck. But Gallup comes from a place that says they've been studying human toll and worldwide disasters since the Great Depression of 9/11. And time again, it's proved through COVID-19 that in order to get employees as productive as possible in today's environment, the quote is to lower the worry and higher the confidence. So I kind of translate that in from a leadership perspective. Lowering the worry is all about managing stress, and hiring the confidence is all about being able to communicate effectively and making sound decisions now in today's world, flavored with a bit of mindfulness and empathy. So I just want to speak to each one of these leadership traits really through the lens of what's going on in the world today and being effective as a leader, within that frame. And then obviously open it up to your questions and comments. So when we look at stress, stress is obviously it's external, it's deadlines, it's what's going on in the work environment, it's demands from others, all of which is obviously pretty acute these days. And I saw in the same study from Gallup that before COVID-19, 75% of employees surveyed found some degree of stress in the workplace. 40% felt extremely stressed. And that was taken in February of 2019. So I couldn't find stats relative in the last 2 months, but as you can imagine, those numbers I'm sure have jumped. With communications, I found another interesting stat, which is 60 to 80% of employees feel that their leadership is providing clear and transparent communications. And again, that was pre-COVID-19. The Gallup study actually revealed that percentage has dropped to 39%. So you think about that in communications, what's most important that helps calm the worry and bring up the confidence so employees can be productive, communications really just sits in the center. And you can see it's got the most bullets, and I'll probably spend the most time chatting about it. But let's go back up to stress management. So from a work perspective, when we're thinking about managing stress for our people, for ourselves, time and time again, what I have found is finding some clear plan of action. And that does not have to be a big strategy. That doesn't have to be, certainly not an 18-month plan, which kind of seems hard to put your head around today, but it could be something as simple as just today's task list for yourself and for your team. What do we need to accomplish today? The more important thing, it's not so much substance as it's clarity and employees understanding where they fit into that plan. When we all know this, we're adults, we like control. We like to understand what our day is going to look like. We like to, be able to make our own choices. And in today's world, some of that stuff is really fuzzy. So if we get a nice clear line of sight, and like I said, it's just a simple task plan or a task list for the day, that brings down the stress tremendously. And another comment, this is really just kind of a soft skill as far as anxiety and uncertainty. I've read time and time again, we've all talked about it, and it's really, I think it becomes even more amplified in today's world, which is managing or acknowledging anxiety. We're all adults and we can handle whatever's coming our way when we have that clarity in terms of a plan of action. It's when we don't know what's going on that our anxiety goes up and our uncertainty becomes that much more consuming to ourselves. So, again, going back to that clear plan of action, we know what we're supposed to do, we know what our role is and what's to be achieved, that anxiety and that uncertainty certainly can go down. And I've said this many times in a lot of different presentations when I've talked about leadership or effective communications or influencing others, getting comfortable with the term, I don't know. And this is a phrase, especially the higher you get up in an organization, the more responsibility you feel, the less inclined you are to say, I don't know, because that's not our job. Our job is to know. And right now, there's a lot of things we don't know. From the small to the big, from the near to the far. So getting comfortable with the phrase, I don't know, is probably one of your best friends in terms of helping managing the stress for yourself and for your team. They'll appreciate the honesty and the authentic note underneath. And I always say when people say, I don't like saying I don't know. And I'm like, I don't like saying I don't know either. But what makes me feel better about saying I don't know is I'll get back to you. Or when I do know, you'll know. And people, again, your people will appreciate, where we stand today, but as soon as something is to be known, they're going to be in the loop. And that's really what people are looking for. Another way to manage stress kind of from a tactics perspective is to establish any kind of routine or predictability that you can control. And an obvious tactic associated with that would be huddles or two-a-days. Every day meet with your team in some way, shape, or form for a set period of time and just talk about what's in front of them. Be careful not to get into kind of like strategies and big decisions and veer off and talk about other things. Just what's in front of us, who's responsible for what, any questions, let's go. It's the conversation that brings value in terms of managing the stress and also people feeling connected. But the pattern, the rhythm of a daily huddle is so, just dearly needed for all of us. It's nice, I don't know about you, but when I look at my calendar and I see like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have these standing meetings, I know what day of the week it is, right? I mean, our local newscaster is starting the broadcast with saying, today is Monday, today is Friday. Just getting that rhythm and that predictability, that definitely brings down the stress for everybody. And if you're feeling, like one-on-one with a team member and you can see or you're getting a vibe from them that they're stressed or they're anxious, as I said up here on the bullet, it's okay to acknowledge it. In fact, employees appreciate, being heard from their leader through that lens of just acknowledging, yeah, I'm stressed out today. Let's take a minute and talk about it. Let's just see what's going on, see what we can solve and what we can't. Ignoring it, and that this is kind of a hard, not hard, but challenging, I think, for some people when they're feeling stress from their own team. The idea of like stopping everything and having a chat about it, it's like, that seems a little odd. But actually, the consequence of not acknowledging, if your team is, in front of you and you got 3 people on a Zoom and you can tell they're all troubled, not acknowledging that actually causes the stress to go up. Because when people don't know what's going on, when their stress isn't being acknowledged, what do we all do? We start creating the story for ourselves. We get into our own heads and we start filling in that vacuum. And more times than not, what that self-talk is, it's more toward the negative or the worry or the fearsome side than it is the positive or the optimistic. So go ahead and just acknowledge it. Hey guys, I know we're all stressed out. I can feel the anxiety in the room. Let's just take some time and talk about it. So let's move on to team communications. You can see the bullets here. The most effective communications under any circumstance is communications that is transparent, that's present, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit, and a little bit of dovetailing from where we just were, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So transparent communications, and this really, again, going under here, decision-making, the word that comes to my mind is mindfulness. Are the communications that you are pushing out, are they mindful in terms of being heard on your team members' perspective? What do they need to hear? Sometimes we get so caught up in like, I gotta just let everybody know today that this garage is closing. I just gotta let them know. And you know what? The easiest thing is a text. It's worth that minute to say, is that the best way for my team to hear about what's going on today? I mean, it was easy for me because I can type the text over breakfast. But get in their heads a little bit what their day is looking like, and is that the best thing for them? And we'll talk a little bit more about mindfulness under decision making. What I mean by communications being present is really just that, letting your team know when, where, who, how, about any given activity that's going on throughout their day, 7 days a week. They just want to know, how do they find out? If it's not directly from you, which shared drive should they be looking at? The logistics of connecting to meetings, everything. They just want it present and they want it relevant. And, again, that's kind of putting on that hat of what's best for them. And the good, the bad, and the ugly, this again, oops, sorry, I did that. The good, the bad, the ugly is all about, it's fun to give out the good news and successes. And let's just talk about that for a minute. Right now, it might be, I think it's easy for all of us to go from one activity to the next. Okay, I got these 3 things done. Not going to meet this meeting. I'm going to make a phone call. Ooh, so-and-so wants me to join this Zoom at 2. But, we just kind of move on. And I think now more than ever, it's important to acknowledge the good, no matter how big or small, whatever the success might be, just take a moment and celebrate. I mean, I say that all the time when I work with people on strategic planning. You know, they want to get into, what are we going to do this year? And I very kindly, I try to be very kind in saying, how about if we just take 15 minutes and look at last year? I want to fill a whiteboard with everything you guys got done last year. And more times than not, people are like, but I thought we were going to get to work. Oh, we will. But let's just take a moment and think about what we've got done. And at the end of that exercise, everyone's usually like, boy, you know, there are two things. We really did a lot. And the other one is, you know, all right, that wasn't a waste of time. I'm kind of glad we did that. And I like that principle just transactionally throughout the day. You know, just take a moment, acknowledge, and celebrate success. The bad and the ugly, you know, I can't stress this enough. And it's, you know, it's in a lot of research. Honesty is so paramount right now for your team and for yourselves. People, and I've said this, I think I just said this a few minutes ago, adults will handle bad news. We are amazingly resilient. A lot of times, I know for myself, it's like, just tell me what it is and I'll deal with it. I might not like it. I might not agree with it, but you know what? At least I've got the full story. You've told me peer to peer what's going on. And oftentimes we confuse how people are going to react. Well, they're not going to like that. Ooh, they might get mad at me, with the absolute paramount importance that everybody needs to know what's going on, and not the filtered version. They need to know the bad and the ugly. And ironically, I guess, you know, your people will respect you more when they hear everything in equal measure. I have a very good friend of mine who's also a client as an example, and he's an executive. I've been working very closely with him throughout all of this, and he's had to go through now 3 tranches, and it's not unusual, I'm sure, to hear this, but 3 tranches of downsizing. And so every level of downsizing, he's been very honest and empathetic, and he's done and said all the right things. But I think the key takeaway for me in watching him go through this and being a part of it is that he's very honest throughout the conversation and saying, I don't know if this is the last round. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I want you to be prepared now for the worst case scenario. And he was saying that on March 11th. And he continues to say that. And I know from the feedback from his team that they really appreciate it. Don't like it, makes them very uncomfortable. Creates a little stress, but at least they know how to prepare for themselves, that if the next step comes, they're not blindsided. I just like that story. So anyways, celebrate the successes. I've said that. Be visible every day, one way or another. I have another client of mine where half his team has been furloughed. He sends out a text every Monday checking in on everyone. They swap recipes. They do a Zoom once a week. He sends them training links on a very consistent basis of, hey, Donna, I know you were struggling with Excel. I think I found the 15-minute fix for you. Again, very centered around what they need. And he's going to keep doing that, until they get back to their normal staffing levels. And, again, I've been a part of here and there, those communications. I know he's very consistent with them, and the team has been super engaged and very appreciative, as you can imagine. And the last thing I'll say as far as communications is, allow levity and humor into your day as well, especially with celebrating successes. I'm sure we've all seen some really good YouTube clips of teachers going to students' neighborhoods and wearing clown suits and visiting children in the hospital. Anything that brings a smile to the face is as important now as it's ever been, and very welcomed. So let's move on to decision-making. And really, decision-making is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because there's not a lot of universal truths on decision-making, but through the lens of today's leadership and feeding that, how to lower the worry and higher the confidence, the 2 traits that really just keep coming to my mind are mindfulness and empathy. And I've kind of already stressed this, talking about stress management and communications. Mindfulness is just really being all about the others. Mindful leadership is very much a leading thought practice in the world of leadership and organizational development. But I think germane and specific to the context of today, mindfulness is really just about trying as best possible of putting everyone's considerations on the table when making decisions. And then obviously empathy. There's this really cool ring theory, and I won't go into it, but if you've seen it, it's really about crisis management, and whoever's in crisis is in the center of the rings, and everybody outside, they have one job. They feed empathy in and they dump out, meaning whoever the person is in crisis, we all gather around and just express nothing but empathy and sympathy for that individual. But if we ourselves are feeling anxiety and stress about the situation, we can't go in the middle of the circle and tell the person affected. We got to go one ring out. And I think with decision making, you know, especially with communications, and really in the spirit of saying, I'm right there with you, you know, this has been really hard for me too, to the person affected, your team member, you know, empathy would say, actually save that and tell that to your spouse or tell that to your friends or your coworkers, how you feel about it. Express empathy to the employee. So I've rattled on for quite a while here. Let's see. I think I'm okay on time-wise. But what I'd like to do is obviously, and you know, if you've attended Shop Talks, you know now, it's time for us to chat together as a group, whether it be questions to myself or others, or comments or stories that you'd like to share. We're going to move into that next. But to kind of kick things off and help manage our time now for the next 40 minutes or 35 minutes, I put together a real quick pulse survey that hopefully will help us prioritize where we want to go next. So here it comes. Get out your handy dandy smartphone. And you can see right here, if you don't mind texting to the top, you can see respond either to email or actually use the text, the second line. Text CNIECE 354 2233 to join, and then choose option A or B as you're getting that set up. I'll just review the question from today's Shop Talk on leadership. I'm most curious to learn about. So I've given a little bit of a download on stress management, team communications, and decision making. Hopefully your wheels are turning and your brain is kind of getting, you know, in the headspace of where we want to be. Yeah.
We have a few people on here who can't see the screen they're sharing.
That's weird. All right, well, I'm not gonna get crazy about it if it doesn't come through. That's weird. I don't know what that's going on. I don't know what's going on with that.
Now we can see the question, but we couldn't see where to text. So I don't know if you can go back one so we could see it and enter it.
Right, so right now you don't see it, right?
I think there's just a lag. So what, if you want to tell us, I think what the text is, we could probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
So address it to, hold on a second. You know what? I'll put this up on screen. You want to address it to CNIECE 354, CNIESE 354, and then you text 2233 to join. And then you vote on A is stress management, B, team communications, or C, decision making. And I'll put that up on screen right now. And then I'll be able to see the results. See if this works. If not, we'll bail and just get into the chat.
Oh, see.
And then you should be able to enter A, B, or C.
It's kicking mine back on the CNIECE.
All right, well, technology is just not helping us. Well, I think we should bail. I vote we bail.
Well, you could have, you know, you go back to your question and people can just pop in the chat box and be like, talk about this or that. You know what I mean? Like, do it that way.
Okay, let's do it that way. That's so weird. See what's coming through. Yeah, whoever wrote John Krasinski, good news, totally signed up for their daily blog. It's amazing. Back to the question though, sorry. All right, so we're getting some pretty evens between A's and B's. That's cool. That sounds good. I like it. Thank you. Good thinking, Rachel. Boy, on their toes, I tell you. Well done. All right, that's excellent. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has a question or something they want to throw on the table for the rest of us to react to when it comes to stress or team communications. I really open it up right now.
So you can either raise your hand if you can find that little guy, or you can pop it right in the chat box. There was a comment earlier back about, having to work from home, the timing and communication method, like your choice matters, right? I'm thinking about something 9 p.m. So I just shoot off a text to 6 of my team members, right? And now 3 of them can't sleep, right? But like thinking about, you know what I mean? Those blurring those lines and how to consider what is the right method. And what constitutes effective communication. Wow.
So we have a couple people who want to comment. I'm going to go ahead and start with Dave Honorado. Dave, you're unmuted.
Hey, Colleen. I hear what you're saying about managing stress, but is it the same for managing stress for yourself and your staff, where a lot of times I see staff being very stressful, and sometimes that's harder to deal with other than stress for yourself? Is there different options to deal with that for stress dealing with staff other than yourself?
Boy, that's great. That's a great point, Dave. Good question. In my opinion, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but in my opinion, stress management is very sequential. You have to manage your own stress, like anything else, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. That famous saying. So a couple of things are coming to mind. If I have to be with my team and I know I'm stressed out, I'll do something physical. I'll walk around the block. I'll breathe for 10 minutes. I got to do something to center me, because if I don't, and I walk into that room or I walk into a Zoom, I'm not present, and they know it. And then I'm also not picking up on their cues either, what's going on with them. So I know for myself, there's some tips and tricks. Breathing is just really the best one. 1 minute of breathing. I mean, anybody who wears a smartwatch, how many times you get that reminder, it's time to breathe, and you're like, yeah, I'll do that next hour. But breathing really is probably one of the best things to do. And then acknowledge it. I've done that too in the start of team meetings. Look, you guys, we're all stressed out right now, me included. Let's just take a minute and figure out what we can get done given what's going on right now, and what we can push off until we're in a better headspace. And, again, I just, that acknowledgement alone brings it down in the room. People feel that. Hope that helps.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right, and we're going to go to Casey Jones next. Casey, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Colleen, thanks for doing this. This is a really important topic, and I can't think of anyone more qualified to do it than you, so much appreciated. My question is similar to Dave's, kind of along the same lines, and I've been thinking a lot about the burden, the extra burden maybe that leaders have, because they may have, they're thinking about themselves and the anxiety that comes with, just sort of coping with all that we're coping with now, but at the same time thinking about the welfare of the people to whom, they lead and their families and all of that. And you sort of answered the question, one question that I had, and that was to take care of yourself, but I wonder, I wonder what you might say about the question of balancing optimism and, sort of being realistic at the same time, right? How do we, as leaders, or how do we do that? And you talked a little bit about it in equal measures. I think that's what I took away from your comment, but there's just a fine line between, I think it's important for leaders to be optimistic, but we have to be realistic too. And they, leaders may be the ones, or very likely the ones, that will have to execute, really unpleasant actions that affect the welfare of those that report to them. So anything you wanted to respond to in any of that balance between optimistic and realistic communications, and what special things do leaders have to do to sort of cope with the level of responsibility that they have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Casey. As always, you provide the most thought-provoking questions. For me, what comes to my mind, and I'm, obviously open the floor for anybody else who has comments on this one. For me, the word authenticity really comes to mind. Being authentic. Every context is so different. Communications right now is so dynamic. I don't know if there's like one rule that's even that's going to work 80-20% of the time. But I think, going back to honesty and building trust, to help lower overall anxiety, being authentic is really the most important, with balance, clearly. But, for myself, if I just lay out a bunch of bad news, and I'm letting them process, and then kind of taking a moment and saying, what can we gain from this? What good is there from this? Allowing that kind of conversation to come in, if it's appropriate in the room, then yeah, absolutely. But I really think underneath all of it is being authentic as a leader and being incredibly self-aware. Read the room. If you think you're laying out what is like reality and we're all adults, but then you're seeing over Zoom people just furrowed brows and hand wringing and looking away, and facial expressions are saying stop, then stop, right? Like, enough reality for one day. And then try to, bring it back into the center of why you're saying these things, and what people can do with them, both, to help and to process. That's really what comes to my mind, is to read the room. I'm curious if anybody else has any thoughts on that one.
Colleen, there's a comment from the chat. I'm going to read it to the group here from Anthony. Currently, staff is scattered across many different technological abilities, and some live in rural areas where even phone service is not reliable. What advice do you have for an effective group communication so people don't feel left out?
I'd be curious to know, how many are that disconnected, because that would drive your communications. Your telephone's your best friend. If they don't have internet connection, but they have a telephone, figure out an audio teleconference line that they can participate in. If they are that challenged to be part of it real time, if it were me, I would ask a team member to capture the highlights of the call and put it in the mail. Honestly, I know we gotta watch our mail and be careful with it, but if it's not a sense of urgency, any communications, regardless of timing, is good communication. So if I get a message 3 days later because I get it on a memo or a letter or a postcard, that's better than not being included at all. I hope that helps. Again, open to people. Anybody else have that kind of situation? People aren't able to connect?
Feel free to use the raise your hand function or use the group chat.
Well, there's also, the comfort level with technology. For example, my father and stepmother won't get on Zoom because of security issues, so they wouldn't sing my daughter happy birthday, but we FaceTimed. Fine. You know what I mean? There's a comfort level, those of us that have worked from home for a long time, we're like, okay, these are kind of the rules. We're kind of far enough in now that people are getting, you know what I mean? The Zoom rules, or what you do and you don't do.
Right.
But it's a hard situation. I don't know how many people you're talking about. So there's lots of tech, but it's all tech.
Yeah, well said.
What do you think of the group happy hour, the virtual happy hour?
Well, am I wearing my leadership practitioner hat or my Sister Mary HR hat?
Both. I think both. I'm on both sides of the fence here. So
Well, I mean, I'm all for Friday night happy hours. They don't have to have alcohol, by the way. I know a lot of people have been doing Friday night happy hours, and again, like, exchanging recipes, showing pictures, different hobbies. I know one happy hour group that talks about they're really into making masks. So every Friday they get together and they figure out like different ways. I mean, they're super advanced. They figured out an air mask that you can put an air mask where you can put what is it? A filter in it. So anyways, I digress. I think any kind of social time once a week, again, predictability, patterns, rhythms is a good thing. Obviously, with like all things that involve alcohol, be a good judge of how many cocktails you can have. And it is still considered a work meeting, especially if, there's your supervisor there and you do cover off work items and it's 4 o'clock Friday, those things haven't changed. So, and I thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't had anybody call and say, I got a problem here. We have Friday night happy hour and, Lucy is kind of a hot mess by 4:30.
No, but I think, the Zoom fatigue discussion. So, been on 5 to 8 hours of Zoom calls already.
Right.
Work happy hour is 6 o'clock. Is it mandatory? Is it not mandatory? Do I get penalized for not showing up? You know what I mean? Like there's definitely a different level of social pressure. So I have mixed emotions about it, not about even from the alcohol standpoint, but from like a pressure standpoint on your team. That's dinner time, and that's when your kids need to do their homework or whatever it is that you're particularly dealing with,
Right. Well, I would say from a leadership perspective, if I'm the leader of my team and I want to do Friday night, 6 o'clock or Thursday night, or the draft that just came through, let's everybody Zoom at 7 o'clock at night with beers and wings. It's my responsibility to make it very clear the rules, if you will. It's totally optional. There is no consequence whether you join, whether you don't join, whether you say something, whether you don't say something. It's my responsibility. As an employee, if my leader put that in front of me and I was uncomfortable, I should have the ability to go to the leader and say, you know what, I'm not a after 5 kind of gal. I'm not comfortable with this kind of forum. And that should be accepted.
Hey, Colleen, I have a question here. I have a supervisor who manages through a lens of black and white. So empathy is not exactly his first thought when having the hard conversation. Any advice on how to help him as a leader to pivot his tone and words to be more empathetic?
That's a good question. Yeah, a couple of thoughts come to mind on that one. The first and probably the most effort on the leader's perspective is really doing some heavy one-on-one coaching with that supervisor. Like, hey, Colleen, you're really good at communicating the message, but it's kind of coming down, as a 15-pound sledgehammer. And we got to kind of see if we can balance that out a little bit with some empathy, mildness, a little bit more sensitivity. So let's just go through what the last conversation was that I observed this. And here's my opinion of what I think you could do differently next time to be a little bit more effective that way from the human side. If you're like, yeah, that all sounds really good. I just don't think my supervisor is going to hear any of that. Then myself, I would probably intervene and say, okay, you know what, Joe supervisor, the next meeting you have like this, we're going to call HR in and we're going to balance out the little partnership here. You can give the reality, the stark news, and let HR balance out a little bit on the humanity side. Or even better, I'm going to join the next meeting. And if you're not able to balance the message with those elements of mindfulness, I'm going to jump in and take it over. And anybody else, any other thoughts on that one? No? Alrighty. I'm curious to know if anybody has any good tips or tricks or moments that they have celebrated with their team and it really hit the spot. Big or small. Any nice little moment that you've had with your team that everybody was like smiling at each other like, we did good?
Well, I'll share. So
okay.
I have a friend that's doing free yoga classes at 7 o'clock on Wednesday. So yay, it's Wednesday. Don't call me at 7. And I was just pleased to have invited some of my team members from work who were, you know, kind of like-minded that way. And they came and they joined, and I got to see their faces, and I was just like, it was good. You know what I mean? Like, it was really, really good. Not just, okay, we did yoga and that's good, but it was good to interact with them in a different way. And to see a more personal side of ourselves. Everyone's gotten a little more authentic for the most part, a little more real. And that's been a lot of fun. So I've enjoyed that. I'm going to tag Brett because I know he was on the happy hour a couple of weeks ago. That was fun. So Brett, you're up.
Yeah, no, I was on a fun happy hour. They had farm animals at the beginning of the happy hour. You know, so there's been some levity to it, and we actually do one every Thursday night. And I don't know if anybody on this call gets on, but there's been a group of us parking professionals that get together and just, you know, talk about what we've been doing for the week. And we're all coming from different places, but it helps to kind of connect and just know that everybody else out there is dealing with some of the same things, and then change the conversation. We've tried to make it fun, right? Because everybody's stressed out, and by Thursday, we put in a full work week, and we're dealing with what's happening around us. And so we've done things like trivia, and we've done college nights, and we've done, you know, bring your pet night, and so it makes it a little more personal, and you still get to network and connect. So I think the idea of a non-Zoom Zoom should be in everybody's repertoire right now.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm sure I would guess that, you know, like yourself and many others probably look forward to that hour of being able to just like hang out with peers in a social way. Nice. Thanks, Brett.
Colleen, I have a chat here from R. Silva. For the last 2 years, my department has ranked the top 10 of the hospital in customer and employee satisfaction. Our rank is high enough for us. Ranks as highest, one of the best in the country.
Wow. That's amazing. I'd love to learn more about that. Like the effort behind that. I know it came through chat, but that's amazing. That sounds like a case study unto itself in the making. Super impressive. Nice.
Another question just came. How much does having a rapport, team building, personality, and learning test play into this?
I'm not sure I understand that one, Justin. Can you ask that again?
Yeah. How much does having a rapport, team building, personality, and learning test play into this?
So like having the right personality profile for like surprises and team building and things like that. You know, it's I do a lot like in behavioral assessments, and you know, with different profiles, people are like I'm never going to be like, for me, I'm obviously an extrovert. I'm never going to be quiet. Like I really have a hard time sitting and just listening. I'm always going to suffer through that, right? But the challenge for me is to stretch. I just have to stretch and say, Colleen, today you're going to listen more than you're going to talk, and try to commit to that. But when it comes to rapport and team building, again, the word that comes to my mind is be authentic. You don't have to be, you know, outlandish or step outside your comfort zone because you're like, all right, today I'm really going to focus on team building. It's whatever works for you that you organically and authentically build your team. You know, like I would go back to that one, like that sewing circle, very introverted. It's a group of accountants, but that team is very close. And it's just because they share, you know, a common interest in doing something, you know, like sewing. So whatever fits for the group and whatever fits for you as the leader, that you're comfortable with it, it's going to have the intended impact. I can guarantee you that. Any other comments from anybody else on that one?
Yeah, so Cynthia from the City of Houston writes, the City of Houston compliance supervisors and leaders have twice prepared lunch for the field and office staff. I've not been present for this since I'm telecommuting, but I'm sure employee morale went up. Feels good to get to have those kind of team members.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's like 5 stars right there. I mean, creativity and really dedicating time and effort for those, you know, talk about mindfulness. Wow. That's really awesome. And you know, really, you know, to the earlier question, that's great team building right there, that one morning. And I know, I think a lot of you would agree. And today, like any kind of good news or good news stories is just so welcomed and memorable. So, hey, kudos to Houston. That's awesome.
All right. Is anybody else out there doing something above and beyond or just out of the ordinary for your frontline members? Maybe not even the frontline members, maybe just the people who are going into the staff every day or going into the office every day. Well, I know that I asked Rachel to get me some Starbucks whenever she went on a run the other day, and she didn't. So I'm feeling a little left out.
Listen, American Airlines wouldn't let me come visit you. I would have brought, and I got a comment earlier as somebody was like, "Is that what I think it is?" You know, little favors. I'll send you something, Justin. Or maybe DoorDash does it. I don't know.
All right, I have another question. Go a little bit back to the serious here. We find that we're giving so much information and so much is going on any given day. How can we better ensure that the important stuff doesn't get lost in all of the volume?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I was hoping to touch a little bit on communications before we parted ways today. You know, what comes to mind for me is back like in the early days of network sharing and the first generation of SharePoint, where everybody's posting everything. Was like, oh, I'll never have to send an email again. I just tell everybody I posted it up in the folder and make them go find it, right? It was like such a bright, shiny toy. The CIO I was working with at that time, he was like, we really need to learn the difference between push and pull communications. I was like, Keith, I have no idea what that means. And he said, we should, just because we have fancy new ways of posting and creating communications, the bottom line always is you push out what you need to know and you let your employees pull in what is nice to know. And so I'm trying to follow that little rule that he handed over to me like in the early 2000s. And really what that means is if it's something that's I need to know, it's gonna affect me, good, bad, or otherwise, it should be pushed to me. My leader should push it out to me. Should make the phone call, set up a meeting, send me the email, even with the link, that's fine. If it's nice to know, best practices, employee handbook has been updated this month, good to know. You know, then as an employee, I should be able to go pull that from somewhere. I don't need an email on that. And I think, you know, volume is always going to be volume, but from a leadership perspective, you can make that decision, you know, before you do anything with the communications. You're really going to help people not only open what you send, but respond. So that's my thought. But again, if anybody else has anything to add, please feel free. But I'm curious to know from the group if you've done any different or new, different for you, maybe not new, but different for you communication tactics. Maybe you've changed a meeting agenda. Maybe you've changed an email, like your weekly email, something. If you've shaken up your communications, just recognizing, you know, that your team's in a different headspace today than maybe it was 6 years ago. They were like six months ago. Anybody have any new suggestions for helping communications, you know, again, as formal or as informal?
I'm happy just to call on a few people.
Well, Justin, this is Cindy. I was talking to an agency on the phone this week, and I was talking to them because they're going to have a bunch of their frontline staff in one of our Friday trainings. And she was concerned because they aren't very well versed in participating in Zoom meetings. And one of the things we talked about was she didn't realize she was already kind of planning on doing it. They're starting to have like coffee talks, coffee chats twice a week on Zoom, and it's amongst their peers, so they felt more comfortable participating. And I realize not everybody can, but even that it's a great casual communication, and it sends a message as well. You know, we're interested. We're still connected. I love, you know, we're talking about happy hour. This is just a little earlier in the day and with less alcohol. But I love the idea because it's not only sending out communication and connection, but it's also giving them a skill on how to participate in this new communication of Zoom.
Oh, that's good.
I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, I love that, Cindy. That's really good. I mean, it's nice for in the moment, but like you said, I mean, actually developing, advancing skills, you know, and participating and taking a risk and speaking in front of others, like that's awesome.
All right, Casey, go ahead.
Thanks. You know, I think a couple things that I think I'm doing a little bit differently, and that is, you know, before I might have sent an email or a text or something like that, and that been fine. But just taking the time to actually make a call, or you know,
Nice.
or connect, you know, one-on-one with video, something like that. And that seems really simple, but I think we're all thirsting for maybe some level of connection, and so hopefully, as informal as we can, but still reinforcing that human-to-human connection is something that I'm trying to do. And I think the second thing is, like, really being, you know, I'm trying to seek out people on my team who I know are by themselves, right? They live alone, you know, and I'm just being more, just finding reasons to connect more often, you know, and just shoot the breeze. Maybe it's not a project, necessarily a project specific call, but just trying to make sure that if there are people out there that are just by themselves and really super isolated, and spending a little bit more time with them. And I started off with like, listen, you have to know that this is filling me up as, you know, I want you to know this is not a one-way thing. It's a two-way street, right? So those are the two things that I feel like I'm doing a little bit more.
Well, that is like so full of kindness, Casey, and really a good example of what it means to be present on their terms, really. So that's really sweet.
Thanks.
Colleen, we have time for one more comment, and Dave Honorato, you're it.
Thanks, Justin. To build on what Casey said, you know, it's completely different operation than we were accustomed to. And we do have scheduled calls with staff every Monday, like to get past the weekend because we're 24/7 operation, and Thursday going into the weekend. But early on, I let them know that, you know, the meetings, the calls weren't my calls. They were used to dealing interactively with each other in departments that always kind of constantly knew what's going on. So these calls were so they could share with myself and educate me and the other departments on what's going on in their departments and if they needed any assistance. It wasn't so much to, you know, for me to take over the meetings, give out orders or what's going on. I'll share information down from the city administration to them, but these calls are more for them to share anything they want to share with us, whether it's, you know, work related. Usually start the meeting off on the note that, you know, inquiring about everybody's health and safety, staff, and then the family before we go into meetings.
Nice.
I think they like the aspect that it's more for them to, you know, the agendas on, they're setting their own agendas for the meetings.
Nice. Yeah, that like that always, like one of the most common questions I find myself asking in my consulting world is like, well, how does the other department know? Like, oh, we don't meet with the other department. So like, I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, but for you to embed it that way. And the other comment I'll make is I think that really answers Casey's question from the onset quite nicely. Create an agenda and look at it and see, acknowledging family health and safety, and then let's get to the business. And now let's do something, you know, a little bit more on the human level. That's a great answer. Back to your question, Casey, of how do you balance the realism, the optimism, and the negativity that's going on.
All right. Colleen, do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
I don't know about final thoughts. I just want to send out a big fat thank you. I really enjoyed our time together. You know, I always feel like it's a good hour. When it's an hour, you learn things, and I learned quite a few things, which I always appreciate. I hope you did too. This hour was really all for you. You know, my email address is somewhere on this presentation, so please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, or if you want to have a conversation, I'm totally happy to help. We've been working with people all around the country on all sorts of things, and wherever you need another, you know, a lending ear, I'm here for you.
All right. Thank you very much, Colleen, for joining us today, and thank you for all the other participants that have joined in also. I am putting Colleen's email address in the chat, so feel free to copy that, and if you have any questions for her, please shoot her an email. So that will conclude today's Shop Talk. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and also invite everyone to continue the conversation at IPMI's forum. You can visit the forum by going to forum.parking-/mobility to join us. And we'd like to also invite you to join us for our next Shop Talk on May 13th, Municipalities, Finance, and Recovery, Current Challenges and Next Steps. We'd also like to make sure that everyone stays connected. We invite you to our Stay Connected page. Our community has a long history of being resourceful and helpful during both good times and difficult times. Thank you for your membership, your support, and your willingness to jump in, connect, and your dedication to our industry. We also wanted to let everyone know that our IPMI conference, our virtual conference expo attendee registration is open. It will be packed with more than 40 sessions and 100 speakers. Colleen will be speaking at the virtual conference also. Deep diving sessions to explore key topics and opportunities to engage and foster collaboration and building lasting relationships. So we hope everyone joins us for that. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you again. Today's Shop Talk is copyrighted in 2020 by the International Parking and Mobility Institute with all rights reserved. You may now disconnect. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.